So I just got back from seeing Alien Romulus in theaters, and I know I'm late to the party by several weeks, but I I can only describe my thoughts as it could have been good. Not that it was bad. See, this is here's the problem already immediately. Was the movie bad? Technically, no. Did it make decisions that made me so angry I feel like it was bad? Yes. Or maybe angry's not the right term. The movie, and these are my raw thoughts, right? Like, again, I just got back. Me and my friend were discussing it, but there's no order or organization to these thoughts, so they're just going to just spill out. For background, in case you're not aware, when I was a kid, my friend got me into the Alien franchise, became one of my most favorite franchises. Aliens, Alien 3, loved all three of them. He rented a video from the video store, brought it over immediately after school. Called me up first, but brought it over immediately. Popped the video in just so he could watch the Alien Resurrection trailer. That was my first disappointment with the franchise. Yes, Alien Resurrection was my first disappointment, not Alien 3. I actually love Alien 3. I love all three of the first movies. I get why people got frustrated with Alien 3, but I love it for its own reasons. I love Alien, I love Aliens, I love Alien 3, and for a while, I wanted to see, as technology moved forward, an Alien movie done where it could have the good practical effects and the good use of CGI and other stuff, and get past the technological limitations of the first three films. Instead, we got Alien Resurrection, Alien vs. Predator. I never actually saw Alien vs. Predator 2. I wisely avoided that one. And then Prometheus happened, and Alien Covenant happened, and Alien Romulus, I could tell the trailer was trying to hit all the right notes. The trailer for Alien Romulus tried to make me think they got it this time. You know, kind of like Prometheus had throwbacks to the original Alien in its trailer. Alien Covenant tried to illustrate as if they got it this time. Alien Romulus really posed itself that way in a way that the other two films didn't. And it starts off with so much promise. One of the things that Aliens did that was really smart was expand the universe in an intelligent way. We got to see more of Weyland-Yutani. We got to see what Weyland-Yutani's major business was, which is terraforming. We got to explore Ellen Ripley as a character more. And instead of dealing with the same kinds of characters, truckers in space effectively was the original pitch. We didn't see company men, we saw military men. And instead of just having more aliens, we created a greater life cycle. Where do the eggs come from? We got that answer with the Queen. The intent of Aliens was not to simply remake the first movie. It did its own thing while also expanding the universe. The only thing it really did like the first movie was the fake out ending, where you have the moment where everyone thinks like they won, they're safe, they're ready to go home, and then disaster strikes one last time, and you have your actual final confrontation. Alien 3 is kind of a miracle that it came out as well as it did, but especially if you watch the editor's cut, we'll call it, because it's not a director's cut, as David Fincher will have nothing to do with the film anymore. The editor's cut makes Alien 3 a much better movie, but at the same time, you still have the same issues where, Hicks and Newt are dead, and people don't like that. But it at least decides to make a movie that's about people, that's about Ripley herself being a sort of invasive, I don't want to say parasite, but an invasive species into this new environment, just as the xenomorph is. This is the xenomorph invades your own body, right? Alien 3 is doing a lot of ideas, and it touches on just humans and how they interact. The prison is an interesting kind of a system with interesting characters. I get that it might not be everybody's thing, but it makes for an interesting movie. And when it's not the bad looking alien towards the end, it's got a lot of my favorite like representation of the alien costume and stuff like that. Alien 3 has a lot of good stuff going for it despite its issues. But it didn't really do the fake out ending. They defeated I guess you could say they did in that they defeated the alien and then Weyland-Yutani shows up. But nothing about how Alien 3 ended felt like the prior two films. Alien 3, despite being about one alien again, wasn't the first movie all over again. It wasn't the second movie. It was its own film. The less I say about Alien Resurrection, the better. Which is ironic because I'm going to have to bring it up later. I'm not going to discuss spoilers yet, but at first, Alien Romulus does seem like it's doing its own thing. Clearly, it's trying to hit nostalgia bait. Clearly, people can't let go of those first two movies. We got to keep going back to the original Alien. We got to keep going back to Aliens. We can't really move on. But at the very least, they did the smart thing, which is we start with characters that are Weyland-Yutani employees, but not on a ship, not space truckers, people that are working in the terraforming colony, or in this case, they're a mining colony, and we get motivation for them very easily. You know, they're working in the mines. It's like the coal mine thing, right? You watch October Sky and you have the same kind of an issue. It's dangerous to work in the mines. People's parents are dying in the mines. Stuff like that. So we have a roughly Gen Z audience, or rather cast of characters, not audience, though again this movie is clearly made with Gen Z in mind. That's why it's like of course our characters look more like teenagers than they do full-grown adults, working adults. They are younger end. They are meant to appeal to the younger audience, I do believe. Again, don't quote me on it. I haven't read any interviews yet or anything like that. Don't know if that was really their intention or just worked out that way. But everyone's younger, and I would imagine the biggest reason you do that is so you lean towards a younger, college age, or fresh out of college audience. Despite being incredibly dystopian, it does give you a new angle on life in this world. That's a good starting point. And our characters' motivations are understandable. They want to escape this world. They're going to take a big risk in order to escape it. It just happens they attach to a vessel that turned out to be a bad day, turned out to be the wrong vessel to try and attach yourself to. But you at least understand why they would make that decision. And then you get to the ship, and a lot of the stuff you saw in the trailer is in the first portion of the film. And again, it's interesting, right? Seeing the facehuggers in the water like they did it, having them run from the group of facehuggers, that's like some like interesting set pieces. And there are others after that, right? How the facehuggers sense somebody. They do have a lot of exciting moments, and it is directed in a very exciting manner. You have scenes that are very, and I know a lot of people have already said it, scenes that are very reminiscent of Alien Isolation and how they're executed, especially when the xenomorph first appears. But the thing that was really getting to me after a while was how little of the xenomorph I was seeing. And even when you start to see the creature far more later on, it is mostly relegated to close-ups. They definitely have a sort of an animatronic suit, but it feels like they definitely don't make good use of it. Or maybe it is just a full body suit, but it's more like a puppet, right? You get a lot of close-up views, but then you don't, it's not shot in a way that's as satisfying or effective as the original movies. It doesn't feel like the xenomorph is actually there with another person. It feels like this stuff's shot separately, intentionally, and that kind of carries with the whole film. Like, it starts to feel like this was made on quite a low budget, and all the budget went more to the sets than anything else. And they're good sets. They all look good. But as time progressed, I was starting to get very let down by the lack of the actual xenomorph presence. And even towards the end, where it was more common, it felt like it came so late. And in the end, it feels like the movie wasn't really about, like, the xenomorph was not much of a factor in things. Like, again, if we think about the original Alien, you do have the element of the mystery. You have the mystery of going to the ship, of finding the eggs, of then having to deal with the facehugger and what happened after Kane gets his chest burst. But once that alien appears, that's what the movie's about. Yes, there are moments where it deviates, but even where it deviates is because it's about the xenomorph. Aliens is the same way, except it's from the beginning. Ripley is dealing with her trauma from surviving. She's trying to resume life again, and she's having nightmares about this xenomorph. And finally, it turns out they lose connection with Hadley's Hope on that same planet. And they go back, and again, it's all about the xenomorphs. Even when they're not on screen, the xenomorphs are ever present. This movie was more about androids than it was about xenomorphs. And I can't discuss that further without really getting into spoilers, but needless to say, Andy, the character, and the actor steal the show in multiple ways. And as a result, it feels like I went to a movie called Alien Romulus, but it's still not about Alien. And additionally, we're not done with Prometheus. We're not done with Ridley Scott's awful additions to lore, those stupid jars and the goop. It's not a huge role, but it's enough that, and it factors in enough that it's, and that's the thing. By the end of the film, after the fake out ending, and I'm sorry, spoilers, there's a fake out ending because it needs to be, and that's the thing, it starts to so much start doing callbacks. It's not enough that it's like, okay, we're going to look like the original movies, we're going to have, you start to have lines that are taken from earlier movies, and then you start to feel more and more like it's just, okay, we're going to retread old ground. And after the fake out ending, I just wanted the movie to be over based on the last stinking real ending, the real final conflict. I wanted this movie to just be done because at that point, I'm out of here. I'm done with Alien movies. I am done with this franchise. Alien 1, Aliens, and Alien 3. That's all I need. And if the Monolith Soft Aliens vs. Predator 2 ever gets ported, boom, that's good for me as well. Aliens Fireteam Elite was good. Maybe one day I'll finish Alien Isolation if it doesn't stop giving me the jitters. But this is a franchise that I'm glad to keep in my past now and just move on and away from. And there's stuff in here that has potential. It's not just the set pieces either. Like, there's a lot of set pieces and it is shot very well. And again, the moments that are tense are directed well, like the music, and oh dude, the music, like you can hear the callback music, but it also feels like a unique soundtrack like Hollywood never wants to do anymore. There's so many components that make this a good film that are ruined by certain choices. But one of the things that they're dealing with are definitely certain themes or ideas. And one of them, because there was a YouTube creator that I know, mentioned how frustrated he was that that the characters are just stupid. But I think that's part of the point. They're trying to make a point about humans and emotions, things that make us an imperfect organism, but also how that emotion make us a better organism. I think that's the kind of stuff that they're trying to go for, even if most of the time we're a dumb organism. And normally I don't feel this way. Normally I don't feel this way about certain things. Like, I'm not the kind of person that watches horror and I want to get, all these great kills out of it. There's definitely something visceral, more in video games, if there's something visceral in doing an execution, but I like it in doing it against a monster more than another human being, right? I'm more interested in whatever Gears of War is doing to a locust than watching what it's doing. And even then, it's fake. It's so fake. But yeah, there was something satisfying about the aggressive and violent nature of certain things in a video game. And the same can be said of movies, and to an extent. Most horror movies, I'm not one to sit there and, glory in the kills. But when it comes to the Alien franchise, part of the thing that makes the creature so fascinating and what drew me to the creature when I was young was the method in which it dispatches of people, the way it kills. And so for me, if I'm going to see an Alien movie, I want to see good kills. And this film had one good xenomorph kill. That seems like such a weird thing to complain about. And it feels like a weird thing to complain about, right? It's like, oh, there aren't enough good kills in this movie. It's kind of messed up to complain about that. But it's part of the entertainment factor that is lost from this film. And I'm sorry, I did not enjoy Alien Romulus very much because of all the decisions that it made. Now, if you haven't seen it, that's my overall thoughts. You can go ahead and complain in the comments anyway, because that's how the internet works, right? Like, oh, you're just a hater, or you're just an old fuddy-duddy, or you just want the old movies all over again, which is part of the problem, because this tried to eventually be the old movies all over again, and I got sick of it. I got sick of hearing lines I recognized from the previous films. Do something different again. But not let's do what makes the xenomorph interesting as a creature. Let's be about the xenomorph, and for God's sake, I'm so sick of Weyland-Yutani being the most evil corporate, like them and Umbrella Corporation from Resident Evil. I am sick of them both. I'm sick of them being impossibly, stupidly evil. This movie almost made them realistically, corrupt, evil, whatever you want to say, something that's more believable and feels more relevant to today. But no, it's gotta be supreme evil of evilness. And I'm so sick of it. But all right, gotta get to the spoiler time. So I can be more specific. So again, if you haven't seen the movie but you want to believe it's the best thing ever, then go ahead, write your stinking opinions in the comments. I don't care. But if you want to stick around for the spoilers, so you have, I guess, in case you have seen the movie and you want to add ammunition to your comment about why I'm wrong, then now is the spoiler warning. All right. So if you haven't seen the movie, you don't want to be spoiled, now's your time to hit back. And if you haven't, well, sorry, that's what you get. So let's begin with that. I guess I'll give them a break for naming the android Andy. Andy the android, because these are blue collar folk, and I guess maybe we can stereotype blue collar folk to being simple, or maybe the girl named him Andy when she was younger or something. So yeah, Andy the android, I guess that's where we're going. But he did steal the show, both again the actor and the character, because we got to see, again, this is an area where they developed more, in that we got to see some of the technology that functions. We get to see a sort of personality chip, we'll call it, in the android. So we got to see the android with one personality where it was not wholly functional, fixed up by, amateurs that don't necessarily know what they're doing. And then with a single advanced Weyland-Yutani chip that goes beyond what the model's supposed to be capable of, we have code overriding other code. And it's interesting. It makes for an interesting concept for how to do an android character that is good, but then we have the conflict between the androids and the people and the humans, and that's again what it feels like this movie's more focused on, which, now that I think about it, is also what Ridley Scott was getting all hung up on in Alien Covenant and Prometheus, right? The idea of humanity trying to create a perfect organism. Like, everyone's trying to create a perfect organism. The engineers try to create a perfect organism. Then humanity's trying to create a perfect organism by making the android, right? Like, everyone's trying to make perfect organisms and stuff. So you have CGI Ian Holmes, which I didn't care for that either. I'm sick of trying to take actors or deceased actors and use CG and make it look like they're there. I'm tired of this. It's like, why are people only complaining about using AI now for performance when we're practically doing it already? And Disney Fox are the forerunners of this tech. But that's the thing, like, they set up something interesting where it's like humans will always make the emotional decision, they'll always do this or that. And if we spent more time examining what happened to that first crew, examining how everything fell apart, because that fits with Aliens, right? Alien and Aliens, there's this element of going in and providing a mystery, but you could use that mystery now instead to figure out what the humans did. How did the humans react this time? Because it feels in some ways like it takes a long time in the beginning. Like, the movie moves fast on one hand, but on the other, you're taking time to first even get to this ship, get to the face huggers, get to the, well, it rushes right to the chest burster. Like, this is the fastest we've gone from gestation to chest burst, from egg insertion to gestation to face hugger. Like, this is, and I thought Alien vs. Predator, the crappy movie, did it quick. No, this was fast. Like, this took minutes to accomplish. And so the thing is, we don't really explore what happened to the crew on that ship. And I guess it's because it's assumed, all right, you know what happened, right? But what if we looked more at, like, did the people turn against the android? Can we find evidence of that in this vessel? Can we find evidence of individuals turning on one another because they were afraid to let loved ones go, right? Like, have stuff that reflects what our characters are currently going through. And the android trying to navigate this as best as he could, but instead it's more like the android versus the people and their emotions. The cold, pragmatic android versus the emotional people. The problem is our android, because of the new chip in his head, decides, oh, my priority has now shifted. My priority is to do what is best for the company. And therefore, again, Weyland-Yutani is super evil. Weyland-Yutani is now the big bad guy. Ian Holmes is the big bad machination robot. Andy is technically still, even now, the most sympathetic character of the bunch, because he's the most pragmatic, and because some of these characters are already introduced to be a-holes, like complete and utter a-holes. So you're kind of waiting for them to die. And as soon as the one girl is like, oh, I'm pregnant, it's like, oh, great. I know exactly how that's gonna be implemented in the body horror sometime later. And you start to really predict where things are going to go. And once you can start to predict where the movie's going to go, then the movie has just failed you in a lot of ways. Because for a bit, I'm not sure what to expect. But once the ship separates and starts to crash and goes in, like, that's when I started to predict what's going to happen. And that's when that's when I started to gradually tune out. Ironically, when the xenomorph is finally in the movie, I'm starting to tune out. And part of that's because what's the first xenomorph kill? A tail slashed his dude's face, and then he dies from acid blood. The dude dies from acid blood. And I'm starting to wonder again, is this also a sign of this movie having a budget, like such a cheap budget, that they couldn't even afford to do a lot of good classic xenomorph style kills? And then they basically do the alien isolation thing as well, where, oh, it turns out there's not just the one xenomorph, there's multiple xenomorphs. And they all happen to be stuck in this one singular hallway. They were never hunting for our protagonist. They just decided, we're going to hang out here until you're all out here. But the big thing is this stupid XO1 or Z01, whatever they want to call it, Z01, this stupid serum based off of the goop from the jars. We have to go back to that. We can't just leave it be in the past. We can't be happy with just being xenomorphs now. And that's the thing. Like, I was warned ahead of time, and I guess it wasn't as bad as I was expecting, but it is kind of weird now that we have a cocoon stage. Like, I guess it makes sense, because even though it sheds its skin and goes into a cocoon. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's not how caterpillars actually work. They create their cocoon and then they metamorphosize. They don't shed an outer layer, and that, because, like, that's the thing. Like, snakes shed their outer layers and eventually grow bigger. So I don't know. I guess it might be trying to tie in to the original film, the director's cut, where there's the cut scene where it looks like corpses are being turned into the eggs. But the thing is, at that point, and especially because it becomes obvious, Ian Holmes is a bad guy android. If you didn't know that, because it's the same stinking evil android from the first movie. You know, Ian Holmes is big bad evil android because he tells you, oh, we have a priority here. This magical serum made from the black goo. Yeah, we know what it's going to do. And of course, they tell you effectively what it's going to do. Somehow this big, furry xenomorph creature in a cage is not, it's not a clue to anybody that's in the room that eventually this serum just makes an alien out of you. But you get the stupid, you have my sympathies line. You get, that has to be a callback. You get callbacks to the way they make the heroine look like Ellen Ripley with a gun. Even explaining the gun. It's like, okay, we got to do this all over again. Like, at some point, it stops trying to be creative in its own thing and starts trying to be the original movies. With the exception of when she finally starts to shoot a bunch of stuff, they do it in zero gravity. And they have to navigate all of this spiraling acid blood. Like, that's actually kind of a cool set piece. And factoring in the zero gravity later was also interesting. But it's not enough. And as I said, like, I guess the theme is something along the lines of, a theme, I should say. It's something along the lines of, emotions are what make us an imperfect organism, but they also can make us a better organism. That's the best way I can summarize it, because protagonist girl decides she's not going to leave. And that's the thing, like, she was going to leave him behind. She was going to leave Andy behind. Rain is her name. That's what it is. Rain was going to leave Andy behind. Now, the irony being that why is the one guy being a jerk? Because his mother was killed because an android decided to save a dozen miners rather than 3. So the android let the 3 miners die in order to save the dozen. It's the trolley problem, basically. And that the kid resented the android and resents this android. He resents Andy. And that's when it's revealed that in order to get to this planet they all want to escape to, Weyland-Yutani androids are not allowed, so they were going to leave him behind after all. And so it's not just her redemption moment, it's also a chance for her to show that emotions can make us better. When we're not being cold and pragmatic, we can be better and do these great things. Except it doesn't really, it doesn't, at that point I'm already getting angry at the film. Yeah, I'm getting angry at the film, not just because of the jars, and not just because I'm sick of Weyland-Yutani being the biggest and baddest of the bad guys. I'm also getting sick of hearing the constant lines from previous movies. I'm tired of the fan service and the member berries. So all of that wraps up, and we get to, like, we finish our, fake out ending. And at this point, I figure, all right, my niece wanted to talk about this movie because she wasn't sure how she felt about the ending, or she disliked the ending. So I'm ready to get a sort of twist ending like how Prometheus ends. Not Alien Covenant ends, I'm sorry. I'm waiting for a twist ending like how Alien Covenant ends. And maybe, I forget what the ending to Prometheus was. Oh, it wasn't a twist ending. Alien Covenant was a twist ending, though. Or a negative ending. But what instead we get is Alien Resurrection Part 2. I don't know if opinion changed, but when Alien Resurrection came out, nobody liked the alien-human hybrid. The alien-human hybrid was dumb. Everybody hated it. Everyone thought it looked terrible. And now, what? We're going to have an alien-human hybrid again? We're going to try that again? And we go full bore with the whole, pregnancy body horror junk into an actual pregnancy birth body horror. And she gives birth to this hybrid that quickly goes through its own growth cycle and lightning speed. And it looks terrible. It looks awful. It's the worst stinking thing I've ever seen, and I can't believe that they made this movie. I can't believe this is how they decided to end it. I can't believe this stuff in here, in this last portion of the movie, got greenlit. And that's when I'm just like waiting for the movie to get over. And this sequence takes a long time. I'm waiting for the movie to get over. It's probably the longest of these sequences. Yeah, I don't even think like Aliens might be the one that took the longest of these fake out endings. Alien one, the original Alien did not take that long. Aliens was longer than the original Alien. Don't know where it clocks in because Alien 3, its real final climax is mostly talk and conversation. And there's no actual xenomorph involved, except for the one that bursts out of Ripley. But Aliens is a good long fight. Alien Resurrection, I think, is very brief. It doesn't take that long. But, and I remember too, with Alien Resurrection, the big thing was, oh, we launch it back into space again. It just, all of its organs get sucked out of it. Alien Romulus, oh yeah, it gets sucked out into space again. I don't know if this movie could have ever made me happy because at this point I am so jaded and I am beyond wanting to see something I loved as a kid but with better technology. Because I don't trust modern Hollywood, but most of all, even when I saw some of Neil Blomkamp's plan of whatever was supposed to be the post-Aliens reboot or whatever, it looked terrible. Stuff looked terrible. Why do people that keep wanting to make Alien movies have the worst ideas? If you just made this a movie of a bunch of people that had their goal, that same goal, they wanted to get the cryotubes, right? If that was their goal, but things started to go wrong, and as they went through, they had to navigate the mystery of what happened to this vessel. But what the real mystery is not about the xenomorph. It's about what the characters did and what our characters need to do better, to learn, to evolve even, and to not make the same mistakes as those previous. And honestly, that itself is a good theme. How to avoid the mistakes of the prior generations. I just came up with a better theme than whatever this movie was going for because I was trying to get rid of all the past junk, and you could still have plenty of xenomorph in there. Maybe boost the cast by about 2 or 3, so you have at least more people that can die good xenomorph deaths, but do something more interesting than what you did. It starts off with good potential, but eventually it starts trying to redo stuff, and it's doing the awful lore, and it just gets so sidetracked that I'm done with. This is why I barely go to the movies anymore. This is why I just play video games, because there's a lot more new original IP in video games. A lot of that new IP is really good, and I don't have to be beholden to my past. And even when you get old franchises, people are willing to do new things with old franchises rather than just repeat and retread old ground. This could have been the Blade Runner 2049 because Blade Runner 2049 was actually really good. Blade Runner 2049 takes your expectations only to subvert them, only to intentionally mislead you with those expectations based off of the original movie and what its reputation became and what Ridley Scott wants to insist is Deckard's identity, right? Blade Runner 2049 messes with all of that, but it also says a lot. It says a lot, and especially about where we are with technology, where we are going with technology. Like, it's one of the reasons that I think much of it gets memed on, because there's a part of it. There's a part of Ryan Gosling's character in Blade Runner 2049 that I do think relates with a lot of men, and especially younger men, in this world today where things just feel so depressing and hopeless. And you feel like you've got no place in this world and no purpose. Blade Runner 2049 did great stuff despite making sure they get the look of Ridley Scott. They made sure of that. They made sure it looked like the original Blade Runner, but they made their own story despite having to bring in callbacks to that first film. Because the callbacks weren't what it was about. Alien Romulus fails to have a real identity of its own as a result. It is callbacks in the end. It starts to have an identity. It creates one. But then eventually it is nothing but callbacks, and it is nothing but continuing bad lore. And it fails to do anything to move forward. And if anything, the presence and the use of the xenomorph feels like a backward step, because that's the movie. It doesn't focus on the xenomorph at all. Instead, it's about the androids. And I'm sorry, the androids always had a thematic purpose in these films, Mostly in the first one, actually. There are no androids in Alien 3, I don't think. Maybe there is. I mean, I know they bring Bishop back briefly. I don't think the prison has any. But Aliens, Bishop is mostly used to subvert your expectations from the first film. Alien, the android represents more than that, but I'm going to try and close this up. But to summarize my thoughts, I mean, on a technical level, and a lot of the direction is good. A lot of the film direction is good. I like how a lot of the outer space stuff was originally done without sound. I like a lot of the tension. It's shot creatively. It definitely looks, sounds... Sorry, I cracked my knuckle. It definitely looks, sounds, feels like a good movie. And the performances are good. So much of this movie is on a technical level good. But these plot decisions, these story decisions are just, I'm done with this franchise. And honestly, I was ready to be done, except friends wanted to see it. And I decided I was curious. I would go see it because people kept saying it was good. I'm done. Good morning, everyone. Just a quick addendum as I'm editing through the video from last night. I wanted to make an additional note, sort of a realization as I'm going through and editing, because I made note about the age of the characters, potentially reaching out to a Gen Z audience, and perhaps that is worth looking into, because giving it a bit more thought. Again, last night was my first impressions, and I still feel like I don't want to watch this movie again, but at the same time I think there is value in doing so for the ideas of themes and things in there. And perhaps some of what they were going for were the anxieties of Gen Z coming up. What are the kinds of things Gen Z is dealing with? Fear of the system, fear of employers and the power of these companies, and a lack of agency, right? These kinds of things are a fear of Gen Z. Even though they're growing into adults, they're still treated as children. Maybe they still feel like children. Because again, the parents kind of loom over some of them. Our protagonist, Rain, her father and mother died, and they kind of loom over. She is without the guidance of her parents. The young Cockney boy that hates Andy the android, he is dealing with the loss of his mother, and therefore it's does Gen Z have this fear that they are not guided by their parents? And as such, I'm harping on the lack of the presence of the xenomorph, but is the focus on the androids and the company more tuned into the anxieties of Gen Z today? So I wanted to address that, not necessarily to answer that, because I can't really say for sure after one viewing what the movie's really going for. But I do want to put that forward as something that I'm not ignoring. It's something that I needed to ruminate a bit more on what it's trying to do. There's a lot of other things, because I do think pregnancy and birth, and that's the thing, maybe that's an anxiety of Gen Z as well, Are they afraid of having children, and is one of the reasons because of what future are you bringing those children into, considering you yourself have this uncertainty where you feel powerless, little agency. What exactly are the anxieties and that Gen Z's dealing with, right? The global kind of anxieties. I can't say that for certain, but I would be curious to see more of any film literate Gen Zers that do view this movie, or perhaps it'll be a while before Gen Zers are really able to give that sort of feedback. And I don't want to be skeptical like so many others are, because my niece is Gen Z. She loves the Alien movies. She loves all of them as far as I know. At the very least, she loves 1 through 4. I don't know what her thoughts on Prometheus and Alien Covenant are. I know she really liked this movie, except she wanted to discuss the end. But, she's 19. She's of an age to relate to these characters more than I am as a 39-year-old. So that could be something, that this is an Alien movie for another generation. And therefore, the things I'm going to focus on are different than what the younger generation coming in to see this feels is relevant. With that said, again, I want to make sure it's known, I don't think this is a bad movie on a technical level. In fact, on a technical level, I think it does a lot of things well. And if it weren't for the personal hang-ups I have, where I'm sick of messing with the lore in certain ways, And part of me feels like there's going to be arguments that because of lore that this stuff's actually good. Oh, it's actually good because lore, you know. Lore doesn't make a good story. Lore can make backstory, but lore can be just as awful. Like, bad lore can drag a good story down. But good lore doesn't make a story itself good. So it's, either way, I enjoyed aspects of this movie. I don't love it, and I'm ready to just let's move on. And I know we've already got the Aliens Earth or whatever TV show is going to be on Hulu, and I'm done. I'm done with the superficial stuff. I'm done with people not getting it. And for Alien Romulus, maybe if this is a direction that speaks more, because horror does often give you a window into that generation's fears, into that generation's anxieties. I mean, Terminator comes from a generation that was afraid of the Cold War, and where nuclear war, like global nuclear war, was a real fear. War games is the same way. That fear is technically not gone. We could still have that mutually assured destruction, but the clock was further from midnight, so to speak. And so Alien Romulus, maybe it will continue this franchise in a manner that artistically it will still be viable, but the anxieties and the things that it speaks to will be more relevant to a new generation. My question then, however, is what does the xenomorph itself represent outside of the general, because this does seem like it went back to that pregnancy angle, and I think the Romulus and Remus connection and some of the imagery there probably suggests some of that too, going back to all of that sexuality and the birth giving, like all of those things being tied into some of the horror here. I mean, heck, maybe that was the whole reason we have an electric probe being shoved right inside of a vagina-looking cocoon, right? I mean, you got phallic object shoved into what looks like giant female genitalia, and is to inflict pain. What if that is meant to somehow communicate? Because films can be like this, right? Films can be like this. It feels on the nose, but maybe that is like fear of a woman's first time, that it's going to hurt, that kind of a thing. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff at the wall, but maybe that's the kind of stuff being communicated here. And if it is, then, I mean, again, I give them credit for going back to some of the original film's roots in that regard, and they are trying to tap into a deeper level of horror than just kills, kills, kills. And that would be where I'm being a bit superficial in saying I want to see better representation of the xenomorph killing people using its horrific methods. But if we're tapping into something more psychological and something more anxious regarding society, I can't necessarily fault the film that, but I can fault the fact that we're not trying to create new IP because we are so desperate to farm and rely on, and this is also a fault of the younger generations and the current millennial generation and even some Gen X, that you're less willing to take a risk on a brand new property. But anyways, not to make this video even longer, just wanted to get some of those last thoughts in there now that I had some sleep and I had a bit more time to ruminate on it. So again, though, if you think I'm full of crap, go let me know in the comments. Have a good day. Again, Gestalt Steven Cinder video is coming. What's after that? I don't know. I really don't know. Have a good one, everybody.